Good morning guys, and welcome to my unboxing and review of the RE100 Guncannon Detector. This is a 2018 standard release that I got for just about $50, and this is the first RE100 kit I'm going to be building. I've never really had an interest in the line when it was coming out, and unfortunately this line has been very seldomly reprinted after it's essentially discontinuing. I don't know exactly when the last RE100 was released, but it seems to have been replaced by the FM line with the 3 seed kits, the Raider, the Calamity, and the Forbidden, which I'll have in the backlog. I'll review those at some point, and the Aerial, which are closer to master grades in terms of quality than a lot of people were expecting. The RE100 line, I do know, is very close to basically a high grade in 1/100 scale. It's very simplified, but has master grade-ish levels of surface detail, and is a way for a lot of these more obscure suits that normally would never have a chance to have a master grade to get a 1/100 scale model. Now, the Guncannon Detector is one of them. It debuted in, I think, Zeta MSV, being a development not of the Guncannon, but of the Methus of all things. It uses its movable frame as a base and builds a medium to long range support artillery unit on top. The Guncannon name was given by Hayato of 1 Year War fame due to its resemblance to the Guncannon that participated, of course, in the original Mobile Suit Gundam. So this suit showed up in Gundam Unicorn, and its appearance there is what the color scheme is going to be that this kit uses. There is a much brighter, like, orange color scheme of it. That was how it originally appeared in MSV. That's not what's going to be used in this kit as seen here. You can see it uses a dark navy blue, almost like police shade of blue, showing off a lot of the gimmicks of this kit. Of course, besides the very large gun cannon, like beam cannons on the back, there is a beam gun on the shoulder. Look at the showing off the very large beam rifle with, I believe, an underbarrel grenade launcher, showing off the gimmicks on the knees. It can enter like an artillery mode when it goes kneeling, so that's probably how a lot of people are going to be posing on their shells. I'm definitely going to try that one out. Showing off the decals that go on the kit. Unfortunately, I believe these are going to be sticker-style decals. Extra unfortunate because of how dark the color scheme of this mobile suit is. Those borders are going to be really obnoxious. I might try spraying it in matte or something to make those borders a little less apparent. And it looks like this kit is also going to be coming with the 170mm cannon that was used by the Nemo Unicorn Desert color version, and you can see it in the background here on the very nice box art here. I don't have any master grade Nemo, so I will not be able to show it off with that. I don't know exactly what I'm going to use it with. Maybe the Jim Quell that I have in the backlog. Maybe if I get tired of the Jim Cannon Redhead using the beam spray gun or whatever, I can pose it with the cannon. And then, of course, we have some information on the development of the Guncannon Detector. You could pause it here if you want to read it. But yeah, it's just information on the development of the unit. It's information on the RE100 line in general with the enhanced exterior detail as opposed to a high grade with kind of interior high grade build complexity, showing off the nice full painted build here of the Guncannon Detector front and back. So, with all out of the way, let's get right into it. Inside the box we get 5 bags of runners, which, yeah, really does not feel like a master grade. That's much closer to what you would see in like a high grade, maybe a little bit more that you expect like 3 bags or so, at 2 to 3 runners per bag. But of course, in addition to those bags, we will also be getting this standard manual for the RE100 Guncannon Detector, showing off again that box art on the front, the painted build, and a lot more information on the development of the Guncannon Detector that was on the box. Inside, of course, we get our parts list, which, yeah, it looks a little bit small for a 1/100 scale model. Again, that's the RE100 line's whole thing. And then, of course, you get into the simplified build order. It's the usual stuff. You build the chest and the head, arms, waist, legs, backpack, and then weapons. As for the actual assembly, if you've never built an RE100 like I have, yeah, it really does look high-grady, down to using polycaps, lots of hollow spaces. Really, any frame that wouldn't be showing is not included, which is very high-grady, but that was to be expected. I kind of knew what I was getting into when I decided to get and build this kit, because I do really like this design. So yeah, a lot of very typical high-grady stuff with 2 halves sandwiching together, lots of hollow parts, as expected. Moving on to the head there, and then the arms, which, again, like, I'm going to be repeating myself a lot. It does look very high-grady in terms of construction. But moving on to the waist then, this looks less high-grady than the rest of the construction so far, mostly because they did have to include U-building in the articulation gimmick to convert the Guncannon Detector into, like, artillery mode with the 3rd leg that pops out from the bottom of the waist. And then, of course, you get into the legs. Very kind of unusual. I didn't mention it earlier, but you will be getting an exploded parts view of each limb as you reach it in the manual, which is kind of nice. And then, of course, you assemble the legs, and then the full mobile suit, and then move on to the backpack. which is just going to be the 2 back-mounted cannons. Very simple stuff. And then moving on to the weapons, with the beam rifle here, it looks like the barrels are going to be a little more involved, and then it's just going to connect into 2 halves sandwiched together, high-grade style. Very similarly, the 170mm cannon. I believe this is the same gun famously used by the Gundam ground type in 8th MS team. I will put a correction on the screen now if I am wrong, but yeah, you have an extra cannon in 1/100 scale if you don't have the master grade Gundam ground type or ground gym or whatever, because those are very old kits. I don't really expect most people will have those. And then here it's just showing off the transformation into the artillery firing mode with that 3rd leg bracing it on the ground, and then the sticker guide here. So all pretty typical stuff, and of course the color guide is going to be here on the back in color if you want to pause in case you want to use any of these colors in your builds. And then of course just a lot of what was shown on the box, information about the weapons and gimmicks of this kit, and showing off the 170mm cannon with the Nemo Desert color version. So as for the contents of the bags, inside those bags we will get 12 runners, as well as this foil color correcting sticker sheet, very small. I hope this means that the model is pretty much color accurate, except for some cameras here. A camera for the visor, probably a camera for the beam rifle, and then a small foil sticker there, perhaps to go behind like the eye or something if there's a mono eye underneath the visor. And unfortunately, of course, a sticker style decal sheet, which extra unfortunate because this entire kit is pretty much dark blue. So these are going to look horrible on it. It depends on how close they cut the borders to the sticker, so which will depend on how kind of egregiously visible they will be. So we will see once the build is done. I'll probably top coat it in matte to hide the borders a little bit, but anyway, moving on to the runners themselves. So these runners were printed in April of 2024, starting with runner PC210 for a set of joint polycaps. This is going to, it looks like it's going to be a lot of one specific kind of polycap. This circle here with 4 different ridges to kind of lock it in, and some slightly different polycaps down here. So of course, the RE100 line, being very high grady, is going to be using polycaps for joints. So we'll see how well these polycaps hold up with the larger limbs of a 1/100 scale model. So starting with runner A here for the Guncannon Detector, this is going to be a multicolor runner in 4 different colors. We have a navy police blue for armor parts here, including parts for the head, the lower torso going into the waist, the torso for the front, back, and lower parts. We have inner frame parts here in this slightly, I guess, magenta tinted gray, very faded. It's a very interesting frame color. I haven't really seen that like ever. We have the inner parts for the torso, like a double ball joint, presumably for the neck. We have the hands here. We have inner parts for the head, including antennas. I don't know how you can see that, but a small inner mono eye. So yeah, like I saw with that foil sticker earlier, there is going to be an inner mono eye under the visor. Speaking of which, we have clear green here for camera parts as well as the visor there, and we have a single red part here for the cockpit hatch, which unfortunately is going to be non-functional. Again, RE100 line, that's how they roll. We will be getting 2 of runner B for many of our inner frame parts, what little of it there is in this kit, including very distinguishable parts for the legs there, a lot of kind of inner details for things like vents here and here. Again, many more joint parts. I believe these are like bolts or something that go in the side skirts, but yeah, lots of inner frame details there in that slightly magenta tinted gray. Runners C1 and C2, C2 being a copy of this section of C1, all in that navy police blue, for many of our armor parts for things like the limbs. 2 of runner D here in black for a number of auxiliary parts for things like the shoulders and accent armor parts. Runner E in that frame slightly magenta tinted gray for many more frame parts, especially for things like the waist here. This also looks like it's going to contain the parts for the Guncannon Detector's beam rifle. Runner F1 here in this very soft, flexible, rubbery material for all of the power piping that's going to be used in this kit. Runner F2 then in black is going to be a number of accent armor parts in black, including parts for the collar and parts for the shoulder shield. And last but not least, runner G here, going to be used entirely for the 170mm cannon, which I think this might be the most modern version of this weapon we have in 1/100 scale, which is nice to see, but unfortunate that you have to buy the entire Guncannon Detector for $49 to $50 to get this one accessory if you're a fan of how this looks. So, quite a simple list of runners for a 1/100 scale kit if you're really only used to building master grades and things like that. So, I guess I'll see how it builds, and I'll see you after I do that. Alright, welcome back. Here's the RE100 Guncannon Detector, snap-built, panel-lined, or at least what I could panel-line. You can't really see it because of how dark the color scheme of this mobile suit is in general. decaled up using the included sticker style decals, and then top coated with Mr. Hobby Premium Flat Top Coat. This is less for protecting the decals themselves because they're sticker style, they're more durable than things like dry transfers or water slides, but this is to try and remove some of the visible border on the decals that are very apparent on sticker style decals on darker colors. And as you can see, this mobile suit is very dark. It works on some of them, like these circles on the kit's right shoulder. Those are less apparent that they are sticker style decals, but this big EFF logo here is very apparent. The border still is very much there. Not quite as bad as it was before spraying with top coat, but still quite apparent. So getting into the build, people call the RE100 line essentially scaled up high grades in terms of parts complexity and things like that. And I can't say I disagree. You should be seeing the parts list up here now. This is quite simple compared to pretty much every other 1/100 scale kit that I've built. A lot of it is extremely high grade. There's very minimal inner frame. Pretty much all that you see visible on the model right now as it spins around is all that you really get. A lot of this kit is pretty much just two halves sandwiched together with some polycaps in between. This kit is heavily reliant on polycaps, and while it's fairly stable once it's all built up, the joints aren't necessarily the strongest. I have my doubts that, for example, it can hold a running and gunning pose balancing on one foot. It feels a little wobbly, a little less solid than I would like, but it seems to be relatively stable. There are some slightly more complex parts of the build, namely the waist to facilitate the crotch armor drop-down mechanism to act as a third foot for the artillery firing mode. There is some clever usage of layering with what little inner frame is there. For instance, on the torso there's only one piece for the inner frame that goes on the front. Is quite large, but it's multifunctional. It doubles as, well, one, it doubles as structural support for the torso, but it also displays the chest vents here in the kind of purple tinted gray that this kit uses for its inner frame. There are some slight auxiliary vents here on the side of the chest, and it also displays the hinge there for the top of the cockpit hatch, which is of course non-functional, but what little inner frame is there is reasonably detailed and is used fairly cleverly in terms of multi-purpose, both acting as display and as structural aspects for this kit. So the build, being in kind of a typical more high-grade fashion, does take a lot less time than a typical master grade, as you might expect. Normally it takes me a couple of days if I spend a few hours per day on a master grade, one day to snip out and clean up the parts, and another day for assembly and panel lining and all that. This kit was much simpler to assemble. It took me about 6 to 7 hours spread out across one day to snip out all the parts, clean them up, and then assemble and panel line the kit. So yeah, if you don't have that much time but you want a 1/100 scale figure, the RE100 line seems fine for that. So getting to aesthetics, the first thing I want to mention are the colors. Looking at least the Gundam wiki for like the reference art for the unicorn version of the Guncannon Detector, which this is using as the color scheme, the colors seem a little off. The shade of blue used is very kind of dark police cruiser blue, while on the art it seems closer to a cobalt. So I'm not exactly sure if that's like... So getting to aesthetics, first thing I want to talk about is color accuracy, because the main shade of blue on this kit is kind of a darker police cruiser blue, while on the Gundam wiki for the reference art used in the unicorn, I don't remember if it's the anime or the OVA or whatever, but the Guncannon Detector as it appears in Unicorn uses a much lighter shade of kind of cobalt blue, which is a little odd. So if you want it to be actually color accurate to the Unicorn anime, you will have to repaint all of the blue seen on this kit into a lighter shade. In addition, the black parts used for the shoulders and the cannon and such aren't actually black, they're the darker shade of blue that this main body is in. So you will also have to repaint that if you want a fully color accurate Unicorn Guncannon Detector. But apart from that, this kit is mostly color accurate. As you can see here, I only used one of the color correcting stickers, and it was only for the reflective foil sticker that goes in the scope of the beam rifle in there. The other two green foil stickers I didn't really see a use for, because one of them is on the backpack there for this very large clear green camera part that I just painted chrome behind the camera lens to help it pop a little bit. I didn't really think the sticker was necessary. The other was for the head. So while a lot of this kit's very high grady, the head actually does have a surprising amount of detail there. As you can, I don't know how well you can see that, but there is an inner kind of frame part behind the clear visor to show off the mono eye and the inner rail details and stuff. So covering all that up with a foil sticker I felt would be a waste, so I just painted the inner mono eye part in chrome. I painted the mono eye itself in green, but it was kind of not visible because the mono eye itself is behind this center ridge in front of the visor, so you can't really see it. But painting all of those details behind the visor in chrome really helps. I would definitely recommend doing that instead of using the large plain foil stickers to just cover up that visor. So in terms of sculpt, this is fairly accurate, and it's actually quite interesting. Again, this is a Zeta MSV design, so it's in that weird era of UC where Federation and Xeon design aspects are combining in a lot of suits to give a kind of very odd aesthetic. This kit in particular, you see various aspects of Xeon design, like the power piping in the back of the legs, which, it's a weird rubbery material, like I mentioned in the unboxing, but it seems fine and is flexible enough and doesn't seem to be any kind of like tearing hazard or anything with it, as you might expect. As well as this head. If you just put in like a little vent detail on the bottom of the chin where the normal Zaku muzzle would be, put some power piping around the neck, I would believe that was a Zaku head. Like, it's very Zaku-like in shape, or I guess since it's Zeta, I guess Hyzak-like in shape, while also combining the Federation aspect of being a gun cannon in terms of the overall silhouette, the very cylindrical arms and legs, the spherical ball shoulders underneath the armor. All of it's extremely gun cannon-like. I can see why Hayato renamed it to the Guncannon Detector, even though it's based on the Methus frame. So yeah, a lot of very interesting design language mixing here, as you might expect from a lot of Zeta and Double Zeta designs. In addition, it's a little unique in that for a kind of Federation suit to incorporate Xeon-like shoulder shields, and especially for a kit to have 3 integrated, like, large guns on it, the 2 beam cannons on the back and this beam gun on the shoulder. I think in lore, it's the way it's designed is it gets into artillery mode, it picks off 1 or 2 suits with the large beam cannons and draws attention, and then while the enemy mobile suits approaches, it like shreds them and picks them off one by one using the beam gun on the shoulder. Very interesting in terms of use. You normally don't see artillery suits being used like that, but another thing that makes it's just another thing that makes the Guncannon Detector a little unique. One more thing to mention in regards to the decals, I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a slight fit issue with the stripes on the arms between the 2 halves of the lower forearm here. One of them is slightly taller than the other. Again, I don't know how well you can see that, but there's a little lip here where the 2 meet, and that causes the decal to kind of warp as it has to go over that lip. So yeah, just something to keep in mind if you want to decal this kit. You may want to just paint these white stripes on yourself to avoid this kind of awkward kind of rippling or folding of these decals. So getting into a quick size comparison, here's the RE100 Guncannon Detector, right next to a standard size master grade being the Master Grade Gym Sniper 2 White Dingo team. As you can see here, the Guncannon Detector, being a Zeta kind of mid-UC design, is in that era where mobile suits were starting to get larger and larger, and as you can see here, it's about half a head taller than the Gym Sniper 2 in terms of head height. If you include the cannons, as you can see, it will become quite a bit taller. So if you're just having it standing there in a neutral pose, those cannons in the vertical position will take up a lot more vertical space than a typical master grade. So just keep that in mind if you're low on vertical space for your shelf, for your displays. So in terms of accessories, here's the RE100 Guncannon Detector with everything it comes with. As you can see, it comes with very little. A lot of the appeal of this kit is going to be the aesthetic of the mobile suit itself, being this kind of modernized Zeta-era gun cannon. Meanwhile, on the accessories front, in terms of starting with the hand options as usual, in very high-grade fashion, again, another kind of way the RE100 is really just a 1/100 version of a lot of high grades in terms of complexity and parts and things like, and mechanics and things like that. The hands are high-grade style hands. It's literally just the fingers pop, the entire finger assembly, including the thumb and the palm and everything, just pop off. You wedge a weapon in there, pop the fingers back on to hold it in place. There's going to be a little slot in the hand there. Again, I don't know how we can see that, for a peg in the beam rifle to slot into. Of course, it can go into either hand, but that's all you get. You only get these standard high-grade style holding hands, no open expressive hands, no articulated hands, no nothing. What you see is what you get. Of course, you will get an action base adapter here. Not really much to speak of. It just kind of slots into the bottom of the waist on the back. It does the job fine. For the kit's pretty much only handheld weapon, because the other one isn't meant to be used with this kit, we'll talk about that in a moment, here is the Guncannon Detector's beam rifle. Very unique. It's very blocky. Very kind of almost reminiscent of the One Year War era gun cannon, where that rifle was also extremely blocky in appearance. This is a little more so. And I can't say I'm the biggest fan of it. Well, I really do like the One Year War Guncannon's rifle. Not really the biggest fan of this one, but there's really only one thing you can articulate on this. This little handle on the top here can swing back and forth. Not really super dynamic, not much you can do with it. The underbarrel grenade launcher is a nice touch, but there is a hollow space here at the base of the grenade launcher that isn't supposed to be there. It's a little disappointing, especially for what you pay for this kit, but it's there. The scope on the side is going to use a reflective foil piece underneath a green clear part, which does look quite nice. Apart from that, not really much to say. And of course, the other accessory that comes with this kit, which isn't necessarily for this kit, is the 170mm cannon, which is an extremely long weapon. Standing up on its barrel, it is taller than the Guncannon, even including the cannons in the vertical position. So I was a little wrong. This isn't the gun used by the Gundam ground type and 8th MS team. That's the 180mm cannon. This is the advancement of it, which was seen in Unicorn being used by a Nemo. This is literally no articulation, which is a little unfortunate because this is, I think it's the most modern 1/100 version of this kind of weapon that we have, considering we've never gotten a 2.0 of any of the 8th MS team kits, and I don't think anything else has included the 180 or 170mm cannon. This handle cannot articulate, unfortunately. The back handle cannot articulate. The magazine is not removable. This is not articulatable. It's just kind of a big brick that's supposed to look kind of imposing. Unfortunately, I don't have a master grade Nemo to pose this with, so I'll see if I can get the Guncannon Detector to hold it in like the conclusion section just so you can see what it would look like being wielded by a suit. But I'm a little disappointed with this weapon in terms of lack of articulation for ease of holding onto for kits and stuff like that. I am glad that it was included at all. While it might be a bit of a pain to have other kits hold on to this, it's nice to have. So yeah, I'm getting into articulation now. Starting as usual with the head, the Guncannon Detector can look up fairly far, not quite in line with the cannons on the back in the vertical position, but it is in line with the beam gun in the vertical position. That's about as high as it goes. So yeah, that's nicer than usual. It can look down almost into its own chest, which is quite nice. It's a moderate side to side tilt. It can full 360 on the peg. Just be a bit careful of colliding into these side ridge parts on the torso, because of course, with this large kind of rear antenna part on the head, it will be a little bit longer than a typical head. Shoulders then, you will have a joint in the torso for a nice shoulder swing forward. This shield part can rotate independently of the shoulder. In terms of side raises, this is all you get. The Guncannon Detector can only raise its arm 90 degrees to the side. As you might expect, full 360 rotation in the upper bicep. Normally, the arm can only get a 90-degree bend in the elbow, but there is an extension mechanism inside the lower forearm to allow the arm to fold up a little bit more, just about 135 degrees. This is for firing the gun upwards when it's in artillery, what's in the artillery mode. Oh, and as you see there, the connection of the shoulder shields into the actual shoulder joint is a little bit loose, so just be careful if you're articulating that. It does pop off quite easily. On the kit's right shoulder, of course, the beam cannon. This is as high as it goes, but it can also point downwards for when it's firing the beam cannon. It can't really pivot side to side given how little space there is in the shoulder shield. For the torso then, as you might expect with this side profile here, you get essentially no ab crunch forward and no ab crunch backwards. So a little disappointing on that front. You will get a tiny bit of side to side. There's a very slight joint in between the lower and the upper torso, but it isn't really anything to write home about. Of course, the cockpit hatch is only for decoration. It does not function. And you can full 360, well, you would be able to full 360 spin about the peg if this back skirt wasn't in the way. So functionally you can do this, which is way more than you would ever want to do. For the backpack then, both of the beam cannons are on ball joints, so they can't pivot side to side, and of course they can swing down for when the Guncannon actually wants to fire them. Oh yeah, one more thing to mention with color accuracy, I forgot to mention it earlier. The insides of the barrels of the cannons are in that same frame gray, with a little tint of purple that this kit uses for the frame color, so you will have to shade that in with black panel liner or something, which is what I did. In the waist then, as you can see, there are pretty much no skirts to speak of. The side skirt armor is just mounted to the sides of the legs. The back skirt can articulate, but that's mostly used for the transformation into the artillery mode. So getting to the side skirts then, the side skirts will be able to pivot a little bit, but not a ton. Because there are no front skirts, the leg can get a 135-degree forward kick, which is quite nice, and over a 90-degree back kick, also quite nice, but again, very awkward looking. I don't know exactly who would want to do that. For side kicks then, unfortunately, because of how thick this side skirt armor is, you will only get about a 45-degree side kick. In the knees then, you will get a full double bend in the knee, allowing for over a 135-degree bend, but of course, given how thick the cylindrical lower legs of the Guncannon Detector are, you aren't going to be getting a full 180-degree bend. You will get full rotation in the thigh, as you would expect. In the feet then, you will get a slight side-to-side pivot. The entire thing can swing forward a little bit, downwards, also not that much. The individual feet, there is some heel-toe separation, the heel can tilt back like so, and the toe can tilt all the way up here, but that is mostly for the artillery transformation because it's to stabilize the leg while it's kind of kneeling on the ground in the artillery firing position. So in general, articulation is a little disappointing, but again, that's a common point of kind of criticism for the RE100 line in general, but I don't expect people to want to do anything super dynamic with the Guncannon Detector anyway, so let's see it in action in some poses. So getting the RE100 Guncannon Detector into a bit of a spin here. As I mentioned earlier, with all the polycap joints and stuff, and combined with the very large size of this model kit, the Guncannon Detector has a really hard time being kind of stable on one leg, so that kind of holding a running and gunning pose was pretty much impossible. So here it is in a kind of preparing to fire the beam rifle with both hands, right hand on the trigger and the left hand on the trigger for the grenade launcher. So this shows a couple of things. One, the Guncannon looks quite good on the ground, being an artillery mobile suit and quite a bulky one at that. Of course, a design like this is going to look fantastic on the ground. So it shows off that, and secondly, it shows off that the shoulder swing allow for a lot more natural holding of weapons, like two-handed grip of its ranged weapons, as demonstrated here. It looks surprisingly good, posed with this ranged weapon, the beam rifle and grenade launcher combo with two hands. So this looks quite decent, and I would definitely consider this as an alternative to like a standard neutral pose on the shelf if you are prone to posing your kits like that. This is a decent alternative and something I would consider posing it doing on my shelf. So getting the Guncannon into the air here, using the action base adapter. Here it is kind of in a power stance, firing the beam cannons and the beam gun downward. This looks okay, and it really reinforces what I was talking about earlier with how great this kit looks on the ground. In the air it looks a little awkward. It clearly wasn't designed to be posed like this, especially with how bulky it is. Again, artillery units do often look much better on the ground than in the air, and this certainly reinforces that, especially with the incredibly bulky proportions with the backpack, the chunky torso, the very bulky forearms and legs. Again, it looks at its best when it's planted on the ground. In addition, the very large blocky beam rifle really doesn't look great when it's off to the side like this. It works a lot better when it's being fired either by itself or in conjunction with the beam cannons and the beam gun on the shoulder, which we'll take a look at in a moment. So yeah, this looks fairly awkward, and it's not something I would consider posing it doing on the shelf. But of course, this kit has an additional gimmick that I did not show yet, the kind of transformable crotch plate to form a third leg for the artillery firing mode. And this is definitely the pose to have this kit in. I believe it's the pose on the box art. It's a very prominent pose on the back of the manual and stuff when it's showing off the things that this kit can pull off. It's very prominent at the end of the manual. It's pretty much the only time the kit is actually shown fully posed doing something, and it's for good reason. I think most people who get this kit is either going to pose it doing this or in a neutral standing pose that a lot of people do put most kits in. But yeah, this looks quite fantastic. It shows off everything that I said that this kit was good at doing. It looks great on the ground, it looks great planted, it looks great firing off, showing off all its firepower in one go. The only thing that I would kind of give a knock against this pose is that it was very hard to get the Guncannon Detector balanced like this. Like I mentioned earlier, the polycap joints really make this kit very floppy and weak in terms of holding poses, especially combined with the size of this kit. A kit relying on this many polycaps without a solid frame to back it up really wasn't designed for like a 1/100 scale kit. It kept flopping over, especially with how kind of in line and vertical the surface area of the bottom of this kit is. Normally you would want something like this with a little wider surface area and stuff, but because of how narrow the contact point for the kit on the ground is, it makes it kind of difficult to hold this balance. So while it looks great, and I think the effort of getting it into this pose is more than worth it, just know that it's pretty awkward to get it actually balanced into this pose, but it is excellent, and it is how I and a lot of other people pose this kit on their shelves. So in conclusion, the RE100 Guncannon Detector is a very interesting kit. I love the design of this kit, and I get it, it's a perfect candidate for the RE100 line. It's a very odd, strange design that didn't really have a chance at being made into a kit in a different line, so yeah, it makes it a perfect candidate for the RE100 line. Unfortunately, that means that the stability of this kit in kind of what is expected of an RE100 kit is a bit compromised. The incredibly heavy use of polycaps, as well as the very high-grady style of assembly with a very high lack of inner frame, with only really the frame parts that are visible being pretty much all of the frame that you're going to get, with some exceptions like the frame in the torso that doubles as like chest vents and stuff. That is a significant piece of frame, but again, that large piece of frame is all you get in the torso. A tangent aside, The lack of frame makes this kit quite unstable and difficult to pose. In certain cases, it makes it very floppy, which really hampers what would otherwise be a very stable kit. I believe if this had a full inner frame, this could handle a running and gunning pose just fine. It would be a lot less odd to get into poses, particularly the kneeling artillery mode pose. I think really the polycap joints are the biggest weakness of this kit, and it's just something to really keep in mind when you're posing. It might be a little frustrating with how kind of floppy this kit feels while it's posing. In terms of aesthetics, then, the Guncannon Detector is incredibly unique. Like I said earlier, it's in that weird era of Zeta and Double Zeta, where Xeon and Federation design language is blending. The head is very Zaku-like, the power piping on the legs is very Xeon-like, the inclusion of shoulder shields is very Xeon-like. But it also still has that very Federation gun cannon like silhouette, the arsenal of the 2 beam cannons on the back. The 3rd beam gun on the shoulder is quite unique, but the proportions with the very ball-like shoulders, the super cylindrical forearms and lower legs, all of it is very gun cannon. It's very cool to see these two kind of schools of design thought in universe blended together. In addition, the color for this kit is quite unique, being a dark police blue. Like I mentioned earlier, it is not entirely color accurate. If you want it accurate to how it appeared in Unicorn, you will have to be repainting that dark blue into a slightly lighter cobalt blue, and the black accent color into a very dark blue that's close to the main shade of blue that this kit comes in. But all that aside, this kit aesthetically, once it's fully assembled, is quite striking. It's almost master grade in terms of detail and stuff, which is really what the RE100 line's going for, so I think it's a success on that front. And the appearance of this kit is definitely its biggest strong point, and if you like how the Guncannon Detector looks, then by all means get this kit. In terms of posability and articulation then, like I mentioned earlier, and while I was quickly recapping the build section, the polycaps are a massive, massive point against this kit in terms of articulation. The inability to hold a lot of poses naturally with how floppy the kit is a big negative point against this kit. The general proportions make the articulation very limited. In the elbows, you can really only get a 135-degree bend, and that's only after you use the kind of extension gimmick within the forearm, which leaves this kind of very awkward, thin-looking hollow joint kind of in the middle of the elbow, as you should be seeing right now. The leg articulation, while the kicks are great, the lack of stability in the limbs from the polycaps really means you aren't really able to take advantage of it. The lack of articulation in the torso really means that in some cases it's kind of difficult to really sell the power behind a lot of movements that this kit can make. But in general, for a lot of grounded, stable, either defensive or posing it in the artillery mode, the articulation is serviceable. And the accessories are pretty much exactly what you would expect, with a cool, unique beam rifle, a bonus 170mm cannon that you could give to another kit, and that looks quite impressive as you saw earlier, and an action base for posing in the air, so it's pretty much everything you would expect. So would I recommend this kit? I would say if you like this design, by all means. It could pull off pretty much all the poses you would want it to, on the ground, either defensive, readying, or preparing to fire, not super dynamic, or in artillery mode. The one point of consideration that I have not talked about yet is the price. While the RE100 line is a lot simpler than a master grade, it isn't priced like it. This cost around $50, which is a little cheaper than a modern master grade now in the States, but it's still quite expensive. It's more expensive than things like the F91 2.0, than the master grade Gym Sniper 2, than all of the master grade wing kits. There are a lot of other much more kind of mechanically complex and complete kits that are less expensive than this kit. So if you're not a big fan of the design, the money probably will not be worth it to you. If you're even ambivalent to this design, I would say that this makes a very kind of unique addition to any collection, like a lot of MSV suits are, and it's a very cool thing to see and have on your shelf. So that was my review of the RE100 Guncannon Detector. What do you think of this kit? Let me know in the comments below. If you like reviews like these, please consider subscribing to my channel. If you like this video, give it a like, and I'll see you next time with my review of the high-grade Pale Rider ground heavy equipment type. I'll see you then.